Let us see how to safely transfer patients even significantly heavier than the health worker without using the patient lifter. At a scholastic and low level, it is stated that in case of a patient who is unable to actively participate in the maneuver performance, it is mandatory for the health worker to use the patient lifter. Of course, this statement has sound motivations that we do not want to challenge. In the daily practice, both where patients are hospitalized and in private houses, do exist some situations in which the use of the patient lifter is not at hand, making the choice of leaving the patient in bed the only one available. As to give both health workers, caregivers an additional operation tool, we want hereafter to present a maneuver that can be at the same time a very useful operative option without representing a risk for musculoskeletal pathologies for the health worker who performs it. It is defined as non-active, a person with strength level lower than 2, that means that the patient is not able to participate in any movement. In case the patient is non-active, it is possible to move him from one surface to another using a particular technique that does not increase the risk for the patient to fall or be injured, and also for the health worker not to be exposed to a risk for musculoskeletal damage. Even though the patient cannot actively participate, the technique we are about to see, it is not a lift, but rather a transfer. We want to stress this concept out as to underline the fact that the health worker will not have in any case to lift the patient. To prepare the maneuver, it is necessary to follow the same order of preparatory actions. First, remove the footrest once the patient is close to the bed. Second, bring the patient's knees at both half the length of the bed. Maintain the wheelchair parallel respect with the bed. Third, apply the brake and be sure they work properly. To block the wheelchair is one of the key points as to guarantee both the patient and the health worker's safety. Now the health worker brings the patient forward by gently but firmly pulling him from under the knees. Then the health worker places both patient's lower limbs over his closest thigh to the patient. To be sure that the lower limbs of the patient do not lose contact with the floor, the health worker nears the knee and the foot of his free lower limb. Patient's upper limbs has to be positioned over the abdomen as to prevent them from being an obstacle when the health worker bends the patient forward almost until touching the knees with the shoulders. As the patient is non-active, bending him forward might be difficult, so the health worker can use also the other hand. Once the shoulders have crossed the knees, the health worker will note that the patient's pelvis will automatically lift from the cushion. Now, the health worker further hand from the patient, passing under the armpit, has to lay on the patient's further shoulder blade. The other hand has to lay close to the further buttock of the patient as to complete the pelvis lifting. Once the pelvis is completely lifted, the patient's body weight is chiefly over the shoulders. The transfer can start, and so the health worker, by means of small movements, leads the patient to sit over the bed without any particular effort, because the patient's body weight is mainly load over the health worker lower limb that props the patient's lower limbs. During the performance of this maneuver, it is of capital importance not to twist under any circumstance the back, as twisting could be the one and only risk factor for musculoskeletal pathologies related with this maneuver. Once the patient is sit, the health worker removes the brakes of the wheelchair and pulls it gently away. Then, to conclude the maneuver, he lays the patient's feet over the floor.